Greetings, my name is Paul Fowler. I serve as the online venue pastor here at Christ Church, and I'm excited to get to share the devotional with you today. So I'm going to be sharing from Romans chapter 1 and 2, the reason being my small group, shout out to my small group if you're watching, has been studying the book of Romans this fall, and it's been really interesting and encouraging for us, and I hope it's the same for you today. Interestingly enough, on Amazon Prime this last week, this old 90s film called Judge Dredd recently came up, and it's about this guy he's like a police officer, but he is judge, jury, and executioner. So if you get pulled over, you commit a crime, right? You get your, there's no jury, right? So you're tried, convicted, and your sentence is handed out right there. Now that's efficient, but that's not really what we like here in the U.S., right? We want a jury of our peers, we want lawyers, we want representation, we want more time, right? But I think this is helpful for us as we look at the book of Romans, and specifically chapter 1 and chapter 2, as we think about how often people judge us and how often we judge others. So in Romans chapter 1, Paul starts off by greeting the church in Rome, and he's saying that he's going to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, and then he turns it right at verse 18, and he starts talking about how judgment is going to come upon the earth. It gets kind of serious there, right? Why is judgment coming upon the earth? Well, Paul says, because we've suppressed the knowledge of God. Well, why did we suppress the knowledge of God? Because if you think about it, it's easier to do whatever we want, whatever feels good, whatever we think is right or best, whatever puts us ahead, if we imagine that there is no God, right? It's much easier. And so what's fascinating about that is, what is God's response that Paul says in Romans chapter 1? It's not to speak from the clouds, yes, I actually exist. That's not really how God sounds. No, instead, his response is to say, fine, if you want to act as if I don't exist, if you want to do whatever you want, Paul says that God has given us over to our depravity, over to whatever we want to do, over to our sins. And what does that lead to? Well, at the end of Romans chapter 1, it actually leads to destruction and death. Growing up in church and going to Bible school and seminary, oftentimes I would read Romans chapter 1 or hear sermons about Romans chapter 1, and maybe you've had this too, and it was about how these are the bad guys, right? And Paul lists a whole bunch of things. They are murderers, they are greedy people, they are the jealous ones, they are gossips and slanderers. Verse 30 even says they're people that disobey their parents. Whew, those are the worst ones right there, right? But it's this list of people that you're like, okay, these are the bad guys. They're going to get what's coming to them. And you might end the Romans chapter 1 and feel good about yourself. But as me and my small group found out as we kept reading, at the beginning of Romans chapter 2, there's this word, therefore. You see, Paul is connecting that thought. See, the reason that Paul is telling us about all these bad guys is not to make us feel better about ourselves. You see, because in Romans chapter 2, verse 1, Paul says, therefore, you have no excuse when you judge others. You see, it's not our job to be the judge. We are not the ones to be judge, jury, and executioner. But how often do we judge others for their marriages, for their struggles with their children or with their grandchildren, or do we judge our neighbors or coworkers for how they do things or don't do things or whatever it may be? You see, oftentimes we judge others unfairly, not realizing that we were just like those that used to be in sin, that couldn't do the right things. You see, that's what Paul is saying here at the beginning of Romans chapter 2. He's saying we shouldn't judge others because we were just there ourselves. You see, God didn't save us because we were any smarter or better looking or cooler or holier. God saved us because he loves us. And so he doesn't say, now go and judge others because I've forgiven you. He says, no, don't judge others. You see, that's what this whole kind of cancel culture type thing is about, right? In social media, it empowers people to cancel people out for the dumb things that they've done, the bad things that they've said, and oftentimes it's well-deserved. But which one of us would not be canceled if all the bad things we had done would come to light? Imagine if God was the type of God who would judge us all for all the evil things that we did with no opportunity of forgiveness. But that's what's fascinating about God. He's not just judge, jury, executioner, he's also the sacrifice. The one who said, I forgive you for the things that you've done, who loved us enough to send Jesus Christ to die on the cross for us. So what are we supposed to do? Not to judge. That's God's job, to judge. And we were once there ourselves. So for those people that you know that are struggling in their marriages or with their children, love them, serve them, help them. That's what Jesus did for us, and that's what we should do for others. So I challenge you this weekend, as you go through and you encounter different things and people and whatever you see, don't judge, but love others, serve others, that they might know the God who has forgiven us for what we've done. Have a good weekend.